It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
This is from Jordan. This next question is a YouTube question from Jordan. Jordan says, Bo, he spelled it B-E-A-U. If you're curious, it's B-O. It's not the fancy way.
It's body odor.
Okay, well, that's offensive. Bo talks about building up a taxable account so that some funds are liquid versus a retirement account. Are those funds best invested in index funds? So, yes, I often talk about as you build your wealth, you want to have these three distinct tax buckets. You want to have your tax-deferred assets. That's like your traditional IRAs and your 401ks. And you want to have your tax-free assets. That's like your Roth IRAs and your HSAs. But you also want to have this third bucket, this after-tax regular brokerage bucket that often can serve as a bridge account. If you are retiring early and maybe you don't have access to your 401k because it's before 55, or you don't have access to an IRA because it's before 59 and a half, that after-tax account will allow you to pull money there. Or maybe you're going to be in a higher income situation when you retire because of certain lifestyle circumstances, and you want to be able to pick and choose which accounts you pull from so that you can manipulate your specific tax situation to maximize the lower brackets and not trickle into the upper brackets. His question is, how should I think about investing that bucket? Do I do something different in that bucket than I do in my 401k, or do I do something different in that bucket than I do in my Roth IRA? How should I approach that?
Yeah, I do like index funds, especially on the equity side. Now, look, you want to have, Bo just hit it perfectly. You want to have liquidity there, so there might be just something, a portion of that allocation is just going to be liquid cash access. But I do like when you're actually getting to investing in equities, I do like index funds because index funds are so much more tax efficient than your actively managed peers, because it is so frustrating when you have managers in that fourth quarter distribution. I mean, we do primarily index funds, but we do use some active managers in international and some other places, and they will have big distributions that come out at year end because they're required by law to pay them out. Index funds, they're basically just building up, and then fortunately because indexes just don't have a lot of change. Yes, they might drop off an old school, company. I'm not going to embarrass myself because last time I mentioned Xerox, they announced the crypto and the stock went crazy and people were like, oh my God, he just talked about, no. So, but typically they'll drop off an old world type company that's kind of been passed by technology, and then they'll add a Tesla or some other technology or new innovation company. And so since there's not a lot of turnover or trading within the indexes, they just don't have a lot of distributions that come out other than the dividends that are being paid on that index, as well as any changes in the lineup. That makes them incredibly tax efficient. The money's not going to the government. It's staying invested. And I think that's part of why it's so hard for active managers to beat them. Their expenses are low. They're tax efficient. Those things are going for them. So yes, there's nothing wrong with buying index funds within your taxable accounts as long as you have the liquidity in your portfolio to cover all your short-term needs, and you're also respecting, because I'm assuming once you get to this level of complexity that maybe you are thinking about asset allocation more so than the index target retirement funds. You just want to make sure that all that is respected as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we see often when someone who's done well reaches out and they're entering retirement, thinking about retirement, it's not uncommon for us to look at their portfolio, and they might have the three distinct tax buckets. They've got their tax deferred, they've got their tax free, they've got their after tax. But some advisor, or maybe they were self-managed, they said, hey, you know what, a 70-30 makes a lot of sense for you. And so you look at their three accounts, and their after-tax bucket is 70-30, and their pre-tax is 70-30, and their tax-free is 70-30. Be careful when it does come to that after-tax bucket that you're not holding very tax-inefficient assets in there if you can avoid it. So things like bond funds or things that produce a lot of ordinary income, you might not want to house those inside your taxable bucket if you can house them inside of a pre-tax bucket or inside of a Roth where you can shield some of that income. Just be aware of that, because we see it all the time when we review someone's tax return at the end of the year, and we're like, hey, your income from your brokerage account is really, really high. We could move that. We could shift that. Make sure you're staying aware of that as you do reach the level of as your portfolio reaches the size where it makes sense to pay attention to those sort of things.
I do want to cut the trolls off at the pass.
I'm not going to put it in a Roth. I'm not going to put it in a Roth.
Okay.
I just said, Well, yeah, I was just, I was. Doing
I know what
the
you're
thing.
saying. I know.
wasn't-
I just want to cut them
I'm
off.
not
going to
put bonds in a Roth.
I think social media's favorite activity is for others to try to show how smart they are compared to whatever content they're watching. So I wanted to go ahead and get you protected.
You know what though? If all you had was like $3 million and it was all in a Roth IRA and you were getting close to retirement, I'd hold bonds in the Roth then.
Yeah, I get that.
Okay, just throwing that out there.